I try and pride myself on my writing with respect to the medical and the what happens in an ambulance is all very factual. It's what happens. But then my characters end up on a plane and I haven't a bloody clue about flying or anything like that. And I'm Googling lots and lots of stuff to do it. But then I sort of like pitched that to a pilot and he came back and go, this can't happen, this can't happen, this can't. I was like, so I did do a lot of changes that he suggested. But then I actually said, do you realize about the security issue with ambulances accessing planes? And he went, yep. It's like, I've often thought that that's a real risk because we don't get checked.
This podcast is brought to you by Rebecca Cassells of the Rising Dawn series. Do you like violence? Do you like smut? Are you tired of the stereotypical novels of werewolf romance out there and want something a little bit different? Then pick up Sparked Revolution, Book 1 in the Rising Dawn series by Rebecca Cassells. Available on Amazon, in Kindle and paperback. You too can become a sponsor of Stories, The True and the Fictional by heading on over to buymeacoffee.com/STTATF or follow the link in the show notes. Hello guys, and welcome to this episode of Story Chat. Ryan is sadly not with us today, but we're going to plug on without him. I'm going to take all his favourite icebreaker questions. But on today's episode, we have Harry Colfer. How are you going, mate?
Good, thanks. Very good, and thanks for having me along. Pleasure.
Pleasure. Yes, I got Harry on because I met him when I was on his podcast, the Genre Fiction podcast, who I was on recently with Jack Roney. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about that? Like, how did that podcast come about?
Well, basically, Jack started doing these sort of workshops where he would talk to people about how to get crime and how to get police sort of interventions correct in their writing. And so he was doing those workshops, and I sort of said, well, I've been doing in the past a talk about exactly how similar sort of thing, but with respect to paramedics and how to get emergency scenes correct, and things that people get wrong and all that sort of stuff. Mainly due to the fact that they copy things that are on TV, and those things on TV are dreadful. And one of the ones I love is the movie Flatliners, because it is so wrong on so many levels. Because you can't shock. Well, you can shock a flatline, but it does nothing. The whole idea of a defibrillator is it defibrillates, and that's not a flatline. And it was so bad they made another version of the movie. But anyway, I had a chat with him about potentially joining him on his workshops, and he was sort of saying, well, he hasn't got enough time to do his stuff, let alone bring somebody else in for a 2-hour workshop. And then we just sort of like got talking about potentially doing some other sort of another way of doing it, and then came up with this idea, well, we could do a podcast. And then we brought in Bryn, who's an army medic. And so initially we had the three of us talking, mainly chewing the fat about what books got wrong or what writers got wrong in either police, ambulance, or military sort of aspects. And so that's where it all sort of kicked off. It was mainly just three guys talking crap. And on a few occasions we did it with red wine, and that went really bad. But
that's awesome. I feel like I've jumped the gun a little bit because a lot of people that listen to this podcast may not know who you are.
Haven't a clue. Yeah, I'd say a lot of people haven't a clue who I am.
One of my favorite questions is, who is Harry Colfer?
Harry Colfer's my pseudonym. So I'm a critical care paramedic working out of Brisbane. And I came up with the idea of writing books, which we might get to later. But basically, I sort of faltered on the whole Mark Twain's advice of write what you know, and literally wrote my first book about a paramedic working in Brisbane who was pissed off with his fictional management, and he believed that serial killer was bumping off the regular patients. And so I've started writing books all around this one character working in Brisbane who's a paramedic, and I'm now up to I'm working on the fourth one in the novel series, and I've also written 32 short stories as a compendium of just sort of paramedic stories. This paramedic working in Brisbane, and they're much more. Oh, well, they all heavily rely on dark humor. So yes, I'm a paramedic who writes books.
Yeah, cool.
In a nutshell.
Cool. Awesome. We are definitely going to dive into that later, but as our regulars know, we do icebreakers for fun. I can see from your giant smile that you are ready and raring to go.
Right.
So, if you could get rid of one thing in the world, what would it be?
Well, I did have a long think about this because obviously, you could go hunger and war and stuff like that, and that's boring. So what I came up with was the super rich. I just want to get rid of the super rich and divvy up all the money that they have, and everyone gets a share. And even then, they get a share as well. But we have a sort of a ceiling on the amount of money that somebody's able to have.
Yeah.
Including their acquisitions and everything else, and there's a ceiling level. It would be very high, but at the moment we have such a disparity with the super rich and having so much money. And if that could all be knocked on the head, that'd be really nice. So that's. I mean, I could have come up with something a little more amusing or something a bit more sort of left field. But I think the way that humans are, we're always going to have wars, unfortunately, and so being able to get rid of the super rich would at least make us all a little bit happier, I think. Well, apart from them.
Well, you never know. You never know. Because you know what they say about the rich, like money doesn't buy you happiness.
It might make them all happy. I'm thinking along those lines. I mean, when people say that money doesn't buy you happiness, I just want to give it a go. I'm sure. I'm sure it won't work. But I just want to have a go at being rich and seeing whether it does make me happy. Because I'm pretty sure it would.
Well, I think it's like $200 million on the lotto tonight. Apparently. So.
Yeah, that would be nice. Unfortunately, the odds against it are higher than the amount of money that you get.
There's this guy at my work that is just I've got to get down and do my lotto. And he's been playing the same numbers for like 20 years or something, and I'm just like,
and the thing is that I could never play the same numbers because of those instances where somebody forgets to pay whatever. They've been playing the same numbers for 20 years, and then their numbers come up and they haven't bought the ticket, and that would be me, and I just couldn't cope with that sort of, oh my god, no, how can that have happened? I mean, every so often I'll buy a ticket just mainly because the missus tells me I should. And lo and behold, I waste about $10. So,
well, I think the few times that I have bought a ticket, I've just won my money back,
Oh, well, that's about all I've ever won. Yeah.
I mean, that's better. That's like, you went, you're in it, and here's some money back. Like, it's just like, you haven't lost anything yet.
Yeah. It's not a lot there.
All right. Apart from winning the lotto, what's on your bucket list?
Oh, right. Well, okay. This is one that we've just come to the decision today. So this is hot off the press. We're going to sell our house next year and just go traveling. So we're actually going to set up a blog called the Bucket Nomads and just go traveling and see what we can see. And with the idea of heavily on yachting and sailing. So we'll initially sort of hitchhike on yachts, which is actually a thing.
Awesome.
You offer your crewing services, and people need more than somebody who's going across a big ocean. They'll want more crew, and so we can sort of jump on boats and see if we can do a circumnavigation basically by doing that, but also spend a lot of time on the land. So that's one thing. But on that, my bucket list item is that there's an old thing about having a tattoo on your ankle when you go through the Neptune ceremony. So the Neptune ceremony is sailing across the equator. So when you sail across the equator, an old tradition is you go through the Neptune ceremony, which it takes different forms, usually ridicule and wearing slops and numerous other things that people throw at you and the like if it's your first go across the equator. It has to be sail. A cruise liner doesn't count. And And so I want to be able to have the right to tattoo the a turtle on my ankle, which says that you've gone through the Neptune ceremony.
Awesome.
And so that's my bucket list item, which I think was I'm currently a clean skin, so it'll be my first tattoo as well.
That's awesome. Reminds me of that Simpsons episode with the stone cutters and the paddle ceremony.
Yes. I mean, I would have had a tattoo on my foot at some other point. I was back in the dim distant past. We used to be a marine biologist, and I was volunteering doing some research on turtles on a Heron Island, and we had 3 weeks of doing what's called turtle rodeo. Now, that's an interesting pastime. Basically, you chase turtles in a speedboat, and you have two people either side of the person driving, and you're the jumpers. And when you line up on the turtle, you jump overboard, and you effectively you have to dive with your hands in front of you, with the idea that you almost hit the turtle, so that you can then grab it, and you put one hand up to the neck, which is this is referred to as the knuckle, and another one is down to the bottom to hold the whole carapace, and then you flip the turtle upright, and then the turtle swims you back up to the surface. And then by that time, theoretically, the boat has come round and is ready to pick you up and the turtle. It got very interesting at times. We did get it quite gung-ho. We did have some interesting experiences with this. But one of the things is that the researcher was an American, and he came up with this old tradition that sailors would tattoo a pig on the sole of their foot, and that would stop them from drowning. And we would each day draw in biro on our sole of our foot a picture of a pig, because there was nobody available on Heron Island to tattoo us a pig. And I would have had one if we could have, but it just didn't happen. Apparently, I have looked into it, and the tradition comes from livestock would be kept in wooden crates. And when a ship went down, the wooden crates would float off, and the livestock survived. And so that's where the tradition of pigs basically surviving shipwrecks, and so people would tattoo the pig on their foot.
That's random,
very random.
Very random.
I don't know, but I know there's a huge tattoos have got a lot more popular these days. Yeah. But I always feel like a tattoo has to have a story. You've got to have something why you decided that. And the number of people I often ask people, especially the paramedics I'm working with, so what's that one mean? And what's this one mean? And most of the time, I'm like, it was pretty. So I don't really see that as a reason for putting a tattoo, because it's permanent. But anyway, yes. So that's my bucket list item, is to have a tattoo on my ankle with a meaning.
Awesome. All right. Moving on to Ryan's favorite question. Now, he's not here, so he can't pass as harsh judgment as he normally does. But I'll try take the persona of Ryan. And what is the greatest sitcom ever made?
Look, I'm going to, and this is probably really upset Ryan, but I have to say that I don't watch a lot of sitcoms. I hate the canned laughter, I much prefer, when we came over to Oz, I was quite surprised at the TV with the amount of adverts that were in them. And because UK has quite restricted times that you can put the adverts in, whereas Australia seems to just, you often, when you're watching a movie, end up watching more adverts than movie towards the end. Mm-hmm. And so we just tend to, at the time, and obviously now we just stream, but at the time we would buy DVD box sets and just watch those. Yeah. And I would not have bought a sitcom, but but I did have a long think about this, and then I had to go and check out whether it was verified as a sitcom or not. Yep. And this is going to be way back, and you probably never heard of it, maybe. But The Young Ones. Have you heard of The Young Ones?
I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it.
It's basically Ben Elton wrote it, who has done a lot of he's done his stand-up, and he's done a lot of books and a lot of other comedies like Blackadder and the like. Yeah. But he wrote this one in his young days, and it was for students in a share flat in the UK, and they would always have they're only half-hour episodes. They would always have a band on, and I think one time they managed to get Motorhead on playing in
Wow.
their front room. Just it was just random, really random, but it was hilarious and extremely violent as well, which was very funny. And so that's my I'll have to say is my favorite sitcom because it is one of my favorite comedies, and apparently it is still classified as a sitcom because it was a half-hour stint. There was canned laughter, and it was situational comedy that went on. So, what's Ryan's favorite? Just out of
I think it's BBC Office.
Yes, that's far better than the US one.
He likes that. I'm trying to remember because he says it all the time when we do this.
He'll be listening to it and go, "Oh, for God's sake, tell him!"
Yes, yeah. No, I might splice it in here somewhere. No, but no, he says The Office a lot. He likes both. He likes both. He loves Ricky Gervais.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that you could probably watch them on YouTube now. They've probably been uploaded to YouTube as episodes. There weren't that many episodes.
No. Well, that's a staple of the British, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there weren't. I mean, it was. I mean, everyone knows Faulty Towers. I guess that's another one. But that only had one season or something like that.
6 episodes or something.
Yeah. I mean, but everyone's heard of it.
Yeah. And IT Crowd's good.
Yeah. I love that.
That ran a long time. Then you go, it's only 20 episodes, but it still ran a long time.
Yes.
No, my favorite is Scrubs.
Yeah.
Which
you see these, I wouldn't have thought them as a sitcom, but I guess
no, it's classified. It's called because you got the single cam sitcom and the Scrubs is a more newer style. There's a term for it, but no, I loved Scrubs.
I just remember the surgeon or was it one of the doctors who's in the tea room pouring coffee into his to give himself a colonic irrigation. I was like, oh my God.
It was actually the first medical TV show to bring in surgeons wearing masks, actually wearing. Because
the reason they don't put the masks on is you can't see the actors.
Yeah. But they lean so hard into that with the jokes and like the eyes and they're like one of the surgeons hitting on this guy and he's got very feminine eyes. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I thought you were a girl.
There was a mate in the UK, paramedic, who, how should we put it? He would always say, "Would you?" Whenever he saw somebody as we're driving along, he'd go, "Would you?" And we used to joke that, his Pudsey was his nickname. And we used to joke, "Look, mate, you would all it requires is certain anatomy and a pulse, and you would." And anyway, one day we're driving along and he's like, oh, would you? And as we went past, it was a bloke with long hair. And I said, "Oh, I guess it's just a pulse then."
Yeah.
Anyway,
but I could talk about Scrubs forever. I just love the writer Bill Lawrence. He's just everything he does. He did Ted Lasso after that.
Oh right, okay. That's one I have is on my to watch list, but I haven't got around to watching that one.
Brilliant writing. Last season was a bit, hey, how you going? Mm-hmm. But I have a friend who hates it with a fiery passion because it gets the Premier League wrong. He goes, that wouldn't happen. That that's typical Americans getting the,
Yes.
Like on our last episode or episode before, he ranted for like 10 minutes on Ted Lasso.
Look, I will have to. I could say that's terrible. It's creative license. It's all that sort of stuff. And being a writer, you have to have a certain amount of leniency on some of the things you say. But I'm probably the worst person to watch anything medical on the TV because I'll just say, "Oh, for God's sake," they're far too perfused to be dead. He's like, "Look, they're pink. Why are they still pink?" For God's sake, they're supposed to be dead.
I think back in the 90s they call it a ziffer.
What's that?
A ziffer. It's like someone who sits in the movie theater and whenever something happens, they go, "Oh, a ziff."
I'll mention that one to my missus and she'll like that one. Yes.
I have a mate who's a director, Matthew Holmes. He did a Legend of Ben Hall movie, like a bushranger movie, a while back. Got a raving reviews. He had a new one out recently, but he's the same. Like, so he's made this historical movie and he's like accurate to the T. but he hates watching historical movies because he's like, that's not accurate. That's not that didn't happen. That you know, and I'm a little bit the same. You know, like when I watch a true story. And then I go, oh, this is interesting. Oh, let's look into it. Okay, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen.
Yes. There's a lot of creative license used in anything that's supposed to be historic or whatever. And I mean, the portrayal of paramedics in so many movies. Is they don't talk because if you've got somebody coming in and picking somebody up, one of your characters up and sticking them on a stretcher and throwing them in the back of the ambulance, it costs money if they speak. And so they don't let them speak. And we couldn't do a job if we don't speak. That's the thing. As you can see, I'm not exactly short in coming forward with respect to speech. And we have to ask them questions, and to find out how they're feeling, what they're, what's happened, all that sort of stuff. But every time you see them in the movies, they turn up, don't say a word, they throw them on the back and drive them in, and that's it.
You'll figure it out.
Yes, but I think, and it's funny watching that. The fact, we're watching. I'm trying to remember what it was. We're watching Safe, which is on Netflix at the moment, and every time they cut to a scene of the hospital, they've obviously used the same scene because there's two paramedics going across with a stretcher every single time. It's the same ones. And you're like, what are they? Are they always there, just walking past with the camera? Yeah, so
that happens in everything. They use the same footage. But old show Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris show. They use the same footage for every single drug bust they do in the whole series. It's the same footage.
Well, I mean, obviously it's budget and stuff like that, but I mean, surely that camera would have been on that hospital for longer than the 3 seconds. Surely they could have taken the next 3 seconds to splice in for the next bit or whatever. I don't know. So. Anyway.
We're not TV makers. We don't know what we're talking about. All right, let's move on to the crazy one. Do you have a zombie apocalypse plan?
When I said I got the box sets of DVDs and stuff like that back in the day, we've got a full collection of Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, everything else Walking Dead. I've actually also played a game. It's really sad. I'm sorry. I'm gonna out myself with respect to this, but probably for the last 5 years, I've played this game on my phone because obviously you get some time to stand there, rant, and you can just sort of like do things. And it's called Last Day on Earth. And that is a zombie apocalypse game where you basically have to build your base, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And kill zombies all the time. So I am quite frequently zombies is something that features a lot. I like the sort of genre of that. And so when you said, have you got a plan? It's like, yep.
I know what I'm doing.
So my plan, as I have it, is I would, when you obviously get the news, I mean, reality is, as a paramedic, I will probably be one of the first ones bitten. So I'm probably out of the game anyway, because it's always the paramedics that die first. Well, apart from the patients. But the idea would be to either get my car or steal a very large truck, drive down to Bunnings, fill it up with as many tools, as much building material as I can possibly get in there, then drive straight down to a marina, load it up on the biggest yacht I could find, and then sail out and find myself a small island somewhere, and then build myself a fortress that I can then protect, and then also grow crops and stuff like that. So there's nobody else on that island, and then I'd have plenty of warning if anyone was coming nearby because the island's small enough to see. And so that's. I always sort of said that zombie movies don't deal with the whole go get on a boat and disappear, and then Fear the Walking Dead did. Fear the Walking Dead did was where they had them getting on a boat, and then all of the zombies that were floating were climbing onto the boat, and I went, didn't think about that.
You're just going to get further out.
They're all getting washed out in the river, and the rivers wash them all out to sea, and then there's the boats go along. They're all trying to climb back on because obviously they don't drown. But you would have thought they would have sunk. But so,
Who knows?
do you have a apocalypse plan?
Well, the thing is, I live in the mountains, so it's kind of like everyone that tells me, "Oh, just head for the mountains." And I go, "Well, I'm kind of pretty set where I am. I live in a town that's one road in.
Yeah.
I've got, albeit they're ceremonial swords on the wall, and then, I'm pretty.
Have you seen the scene from Paul where the guy says, "Don't buy the sword. It's not worth the money." And then he goes to take the sword out and it snaps as soon as he goes to use it. It's unfortunately, those probably won't work in a. I guess one thing I have noticed is that the skull strength of zombies seems to be really soft. I don't know whether that's part of the whole zombie process or becoming a zombie, but it seems that everyone can break skulls really, really easy.
Yeah, but I think it's just the MacGuffin. I mean, I went to this way back, so it would have been season 6 of Walking Dead. I think it was, and they had a big season premiere at the Sydney Opera House.
Oh wow!
And it was a free screening, and I was going, all right, yeah.
Oh yeah.
My brother-in-law took me along, and I think it was that episode. There's an episode. Maybe that episode or close to, but the zombie extra breaks character for a split sec because he's coming through a doorway.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those step doorways, and you see, step over the thing carefully. It was so funny. Just because they're usually really
you're not
really good.
To do that.
Yeah, just don't trip over. I thought that would have added to the theatrics, but it's just I'm one of these weird people that I watch extras just for fun.
Yeah.
It's better in older movies because the directors didn't care about the extras. They just just see so many stupid funny things, but now they actually act properly. But
now they're getting paid a lot more, so they have to.
yeah. So have you finished all of Walking Dead? Are you up to date?
I can't remember. We got to the point with Fear the Walking Dead where they all started becoming separate movies going off separate series going off, and we haven't yet watched those because I think they disappear off Netflix or whatever and then go on to something else, and you're like, oh, do I really have to pay this to go and watch just the rest of that? I think we were watching them on binge because they all came out on binge, but I think we've finished them all. Yes, I'm pretty sure we have.
No, I think I just gave up. I think I gave up. I watched one season of Fear the Walking Dead. Never. It's not that I didn't like it. I just never got around to.
Yeah, it's actually. I think it was quite different from Walking Dead because you didn't have that main one leader that was running the whole show.
Yeah.
But. And it has, and there was a lot of more interesting characters in it.
Yeah.
So it's good, but then it at times it does get a bit silly.
Yeah. Well, I did notice that, especially with Walking Dead, all these places that Rick Grimes takes them to, they're perfectly fine, and if they never went there, they would still be fine. Like when you think about it,
Yeah, then you can just imagine, oh shit, it's Rick Grimes turning up. Grimes, what are we going to do? Quick, hide!
Yeah, well, it's just funny. And I know they're going to do it to keep the story going and all that, but it's good. All right, let's move on to time travel. This is one of my favorite questions. So Mr. Elon Musk calls you up and says, hey, I've got this new electric time machine. Let's face it, if there was someone who was going to make a time machine, it would be Elon Musk, and it would be electric. So he offers you to take it for a spin. One trip. Where do you go? What do you do?
Well, he probably wouldn't have any money left because I've already told you that all the super rich have gone. So his development has been drastically reduced because he hasn't got any money left. But anyway, so whether I trust getting into his time machine when his money's gone is debatable. But let's shelve that and have a. I did have a long think about this, and I do like the whole genre with respect to time travel. However, I do also recognize that the chaos theory dictates that if you go backwards in time, when you come forwards back into your time, it will not be the same. Yeah. There is no way adding somebody in at any point doesn't have a ripple effect that will affect the future. And so in that respect, I would love to go back and see the dinosaurs. I would love to go back and see different sort of like significant historical events. However, I would be too concerned that my presence would then alter everything forward from there, especially the dinosaurs. You know, you do one thing there, step on a, you know, because you can't walk on soil or anything without killing something. And that could have been the, you know, precursor for whatever further down the track. And that would then be a whole sort of like arm of a evolutionary sort of process that you've just screwed up. So in that respect, I would go to the future, and I would look at probably 1,000, 2,000 years into the future and go find out what happens, whether we screw things up, whether we are all left the planet and you know, searching the stars and all that sort of and I would love, I mean, I really do like the science fiction aspect of space travel and getting into other planets and all that sort of thing. And so having the opportunity to travel forward and then see those in reality, that would be for me just amazing. It would be probably very difficult for me to go back. But then again, if I turn up and we're just this molten mass left on the planet and there's nothing left, or we're back to the dinosaurs, then I'll know that we've screwed things up. And
well, you can always send the machine back and leave a note.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Elon.
Can you just invest $20 somewhere for me, and that'll pay for my travels now in the future?
Just put $20 in a bank account, and the interest will.
Exactly. What was your answer to that one?
Oh, there's too many. Like, I've always made the joke: go back in time and get like a really valuable comic book and then bring it forward, and you flip because what's Nicolas Cage is a $4 million comic book.
Wow.
You know, and he won't sell it. It'll get him out of debt, but he won't sell it. You know, like the very first Superman comic. You know.
Yes.
So there's stuff like that, and then you go forward, we get the lotto numbers, all that stuff. But I would seriously love to visit the era when Ned Kelly was active,
or the Emu Wars, perhaps. You actually do
no, because emus freak me out, and yes, I wrote a book on emus. I don't want to go back and see. Freak you out. I don't want to go back and see 20,000 of them. You know.
Yeah, good point.
You know,
that would be pretty
like
fearsome.
I could not, like, we would laugh at it, but I could not imagine the terror of 20. You know, that many emus, and a lot of them were 6 foot. You know, so
yes,
just
fearsome.
Stay there. It's probably why I've never visited Perth.
In 1932, the Australian Army declared war on 20,000 emus and lost. It's a part of Australian history that not many know about. Maybe that's because history is written by those who win. So if you want to hear the full story of the Great Emu War of 1932, then check out my book, Letters from the Emu War. Read letters, newspaper articles, and journal entries. With every turn of the page, you will gain a deeper understanding of the life and times of emus at war. So head on over to jabryden.com and grab a signed copy today.
But if you go to, if you went back to those days, you'd actually see how horrible it was to live there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, 100%. But, you know, there's a lot of mystery behind his story, and, you know, I'd love to see that. Like, it'd be really easy to make friends with him, to be honest.
You reckon? He did?
Yeah.
Didn't he shoot people?
Yeah, not like, he didn't just run around and just go bang, 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 bang. You know, it was, you know, I mean, and this is, you know, the divided, you know, a lot of division around the character. There's a lot of division. Like, it's you know, I got a friend who's a historian and all that, but it's when he got hanged, he only got hanged for one of the 3 people that he killed.
Yeah.
And that's because the guy that witnessed it committed perjury. Like, there's so much dodgy stuff around it. Like, the whole point that Ned Kelly made his armor is because he didn't want to hurt people. It was all about robbing a bank and getting out of there without shooting back, and that. But it did weigh 100 kilos.
But then again, he did have two guns.
Yeah,
isn't that the?
Yeah, well, like that was the time, self-defense and all that stuff. And whether you love him or hate him, he was a remarkable, person.
Right.
He did. There's just all these hilarious stories. I mean, it took him 2 years to catch him. So
yeah,
that's same thing with Bonnie and Clyde. But there's a huge contrast because Ned Kelly's whole thing was political. It was basically fighting back against, the persecution, and that's what he said.
Yeah.
However you want to see it. But
it's usually palm bashing though.
Yeah. Well, he was Irish, It was the Irish versus the English, and
when I first arrived in Townsville, this is many years ago, I was doing the marine biology. The number of times as a POM, and I was the only POM in the Hall of Residence, and I would get Gallipoli, Breaker Morant, and then all of the POM jokes and stuff like that, and you just have to roll with it, because I think that's the Australian tradition, is to see if they can needle the POM and see how they react. And I soon found out that the way you deal with it is laugh, because if you don't, you're labelled as a whinging POM, and so you have to sort of like roll with it, otherwise you're not going to survive.
Well, that's the thing. When Steve Irwin died, like I had a friend who came over from, like, his father was with the military, and his father came over. He was American, and he couldn't understand, like, because before Steve Irwin died, everyone would mock him and laugh at him, and then he dies, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's so sad that he." And this guy was like, "I don't get it."
Yeah.
What? Like 1 minute you're.
Yes, it's that tall poppy syndrome, and he's made a name for himself, etc., etc. Sorry, what'd you say?
It's the Aussie thing. Like, we make fun of people, but we don't. It's all in good heart. If you know what I mean. Like, we don't hate someone. It's just
unless you're the butt of the joke.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember when I heard that Steve had died. And they sort of said, "Oh, stingray," and I just went, "That's not possible."
Yeah.
And I said, the only way a stingray could kill somebody is if you cuddle it. Literally, there is no other way, because the barb is too short. So you have to actually get when you stand on a stingray, it flips its tail up with a barb on and jabs you in the ankle. That's the range we're talking about.
Yeah.
So you're standing on it and it hits you in the ankle or the lower leg. How does a stingray manage to get that barb into your chest and into your heart? And unfortunately, he must have grabbed it.
Yeah.
And the problem for him was his expertise was in reptiles. Yeah. And he's gone off sort of AWOL with respect to going into the marine field. And yes, okay, you get a few marine reptiles, but not many. And he's done the same thing he did with his reptiles to an animal in the sea, which doesn't react the same way. Yeah, 100%. And unfortunately, that's and from what I understand is he did the exact opposite of what you needed to do in that situation. Yeah, and he pulled the spine out. And again, it's his knowledge was reptiles, and if you were a marine biologist or somebody who knew stingrays, the last thing you'll need to do is pull that thing out, because it's serrated backwards, it's barbed. And if you try and pull it out, it rips a bigger hole than it went in. And
so like an arrow kind of thing, like when the arrow goes
exactly like that. Yeah. So it's going to rip a bigger hole out. And so the best thing you can do is you just leave it in and then deal with it. I mean, they do have venom on, but that's easier to deal with than a really great big hole in your heart, because he then had about 6 seconds of life expectancy, because it went into his ventricle of his heart, and he ripped a big hole out when he pulled it out. Not good. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the one thing I've learned from the movies, that they get right, is leave it in, like a lot.
Don't pull stuff out.
Yeah. For all the crazy things that they get wrong, leave it in, work. Yeah. It's like.
Which brings us nicely, I believe, to my book's paramedic stuff.
Exactly. Good segue.
I was working on it.
It's almost like you have your own podcast and you know what we're doing.
Well, perhaps, yes, that could have had some influence.
All right. So you're a paramedic and you're an author. Like, what came first?
Paramedic. I mean,
Yeah.
I was, um, I originally was a marine biologist, and I got sick of research and went into more into education, and was had the getting gigs going to different places around the world, doing teaching marine biology to mainly very rich American kids, doing summer abroad programs and things like that. So I was working with my wife out in the Turks and Caicos Islands on about 3 different gigs out there, which is the islands at the arse end of the Bahamas. So beautiful, but not a lot there. Fantastic diving, amazing diving. But anyway, after several years of literally living out of a suitcase, my wife cracked first and retrained as a teacher. And I then, in between in between marine biology jobs, I would do graphic design work. And I went, cool, we've now got a base. We can buy a house because we've actually got an income. And now I'll start working from home as a graphic designer. And I did that. First year was great. Second year was crap. Third year, I managed to make a quite sizable debt. I was very good at that. And unfortunately, I could do the graphic design stuff, but working for myself, I found that I wasn't very good at, because I didn't know the business in that sense, and I didn't know how to get new clients, which is a slight problem for a business. And so, I had the classic line from the missus was, you need to go and find yourself a new life or a new wife. So I stuck with the old model, and I went and looked to see something else that I could do. And I did consider doing medicine, but I just couldn't afford it because I had to pay off the debt. And then my mum actually suggested what have you thought about paramedics? And I went, well, no, I haven't really, because when she asked me, well, what sort of doctor would you want to be? And I'd say, well, I have to be an emergency doctor. And then she said, well, have you thought about being a paramedic? And then when I looked into that, they actually paid you to train at that time. And I went, that works well with the debt. I can actually bring some money in rather than studying. And but then when I applied, I didn't get anywhere, because on my CV I had 3 years of working myself as a graphic designer, which didn't look that impressive. And prior to that was a marine biologist. And so anyway, they said I had to wait, and in that time I then applied for a job as a assistant senior crimes officer, and got it. And so I started working as a senior crimes officer for about 6 months or more, and that was like going to scenes and processing them, fingerprints, collecting DNA and all that sort of stuff, going to a few autopsies, which is all quite interesting, and may have been used in books from there. But after that, I was accepted on to train to be a paramedic, and I worked in the UK for about 5 years, and then I got this message or picked up a thing saying that Australia was looking for paramedics. They were poaching UK paramedics, and I went to the missus, who originally had said that she wanted to go back from Australia to the UK because she wanted to be close to her family. And so I didn't think it was going to be much of a chance. And I said, oh, look, they're looking for paramedics in Australia. And she said, I think we should do that. And so, came over here in 2008, trained as went through a whole process, won't go, but basically became a critical care paramedic in 2010, and then got stuck on a truck. Mainly due to the fact that I can't keep my mouth shut, as you've noticed. And but when I don't kowtow to the right people, and if somebody does something that I think is silly, or there's some process that's brought in that I think is dumb, I tell them, which hasn't earned me many friends in higher management and the people you need to make friends with. I'm not very good at that, because I just tell them how it is. And so I got stuck on a truck, whereas critical care paramedics, the main role for them is to be in a sedan and drive around and backup crews. Because we bring extra skills and equipment and knowledge, etc., to a scene. And so if a job sounds bad, they'll send a critical care paramedic and a truck with 2 paramedics on it, which are advanced care paramedics. And I was on the truck. If I got to back people up, it would be a case of I'd have my crewmate with me, but it does mean that when you're on the truck, you go to everything, all of the sort of low acuity cases, and you get slammed with the amount of workload. Whereas on a pod, as it's called, where you're on a sedan, it used to be that you would have a lot of downtime and you'd only go to emergencies. And so that was really cool. However, I didn't get to that position. And so I was getting more and more frustrated. And I sort of said to my missus, I was having probably a good old whinge, which I'm, genetically predisposed to. And she sort of said that I should write a book. And then I as I mentioned, I got sort of too much into the write what you know, and came up with this murder mystery based in Brisbane around this critical care paramedic, or at the time they were called intensive care paramedics, who thinks that somebody's bumping off the regular patients. And I wrote that over 2.5 years because that was my first go at creative writing. And obviously in my role as a researcher and other things, I'd done a lot of writing, but I hadn't done anything creative fiction. And so I started writing that, wrote it in 2.5 years, and then I sent it off to be edited. And then I'm like, oh, what do I do now? So then I wrote the sequel. The sequel I wrote in 5 months. Then I started writing the next one, the third one, and I got halfway through that, and I then had this crisis of confidence as to why am I spending all my time writing if I can't publish the first book because I'm worried about what the ambulance service is going to say, because my characters may not have thought that their management was great, and it was fictional, it's all fictional, but he's not that. There is part of the story revolves around his friction with management, and it's got nothing to do with me, absolutely nothing to do with my experience with respect to management in the ambulance service. And anyway, I then came up with the idea. The edits came back with a lot of changes, a lot of things be cut out of it, and there was all these. There's a thing in writing where you have to kill your darlings. It's known as when somebody says delete it, you delete it and you bin it. For all writers out there, don't bin it, keep it. It's digital. For Christ's sake, it's not going to take up any room. So save it, because you can keep it and use it somewhere else. And I came up with the idea of, I had about 6 almost chapters at times that were deleted, and I rewrote those as short stories, and then came up with this crazy idea of writing one for each of the AMPDS codes. That's the coding system that we used when somebody makes a call for an ambulance. It gets coded in one of 32 categories, from abdominal pain to unknown problem. Wow. It's alphabetical, and you get a number for whichever category it's in. And I decided to write one short story for each of the categories. I didn't do the maths, and if you think about it, 4,000 or 5,000 word short stories. 32, you've got about 150,000 words, which is about two novels worth of stories. And I'd have to come up with 32 different ideas and make sure there wasn't any crossover and all that sort of stuff. So that whole process took me about 6 years to complete.
Wow.
But in the interim, one of them I sent off to Adaptable, which is a competition run by the Queensland Writers Centre. And they basically, to win, there's about 20 winners. You can't call yourself a winner. It's you're shortlisted, and all shortlisted people get to present their story at the Gold Coast Film Festival. And I was one of the shortlisted ones, and I was supposed to be presenting at the Gold Coast Film Festival. And you pitch your ideas to producers and the like, for either movie or TV shows, and unfortunately it was 2020 and the Gold Coast Film Festival didn't happen, and unfortunately it boiled down to about 5 or 6 Zoom chats of 15 minutes. And I'd only relatively recently moved to a new house, and the bandwidth was, or the internet was crap. And so at least 8 minutes of my 15 minutes got taken up with trying to fix the internet connection. And at least 2 of my pitches ended up on the phone because we couldn't do the Zoom.
Yeah.
And I did get a studio interested, and that process lasted another 5 months, where they were asking me for more material and this, that, and the other. And in the end, they just said, "Oh, look, we feel that it would be better suited for a book." And it was that point, it was just like, I can't go through the whole process again with finding a publisher. Yeah. And as I already had Dead Regular virtually finished, I just polished that up and self-published it. And so that was in 2020. I published the sequel in 21. And then in 22, I managed to finish off the short story series, and so published that one in 22, the Collected Tales. And then 23, as in last November, I published the 3rd one in the series, which is called High Acuity, and that's a terrorist plot at the Brisbane airport.
Wow.
Involving ambulances and the security or lack of it with respect to ambulances accessing planes. I actually had a Qantas pilot who reviewed the planes. I try and pride myself on my writing with respect to the medical and what happens in an ambulance is all very factual. It's what happens. But then my characters end up on a plane, and I haven't a bloody clue about flying or anything like that. And I'm Googling lots and lots of stuff to do it. But then I sort of like pitched that to a pilot, and he came back and go, "This can't happen, this can't happen, this can't." I was like, shit. So I did do a lot of changes that he suggested. Yeah. But then I actually said, "Do you realize about the security issue with ambulances accessing planes?" And he went, "Yep." It's like, I've often thought that that's a real risk. Because we don't get checked. Yeah. No, nobody checks. We turn up and we walk through they just wave us through with bags and everything. We'll get waved through the security, and nobody checks us. Don't even check our IDs. So
how many heist movies have ambulances? You know, like I just It's you can walk. I mean, literally, it's a free ticket to just walk into anywhere with a uniform on. And I don't think anyone has ever checked my my ID. In fact, my ID is about 4 years out of date. So it's just something that nobody ever checks. Your uniform is enough. So. You learned it here, folks. You learned it here.
No, you learn far more in High Acuity. Believe me. Buy the book. That's better.
Buy the book. High Acuity. I even remember when I was in TAFE studying music. Our teacher told us how to get into music events for free. You know, it's like just wear black and carry a microphone or a mic lead.
And you'll just look like a roadie. Yep.
I just go. I'm here to fix the PA. You know.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So when you take stories, things that have happened, and turn them into stories in your book, like how much change do you actually?
Oh, look, I mean, obviously, I've got to be. I mean, I did have that. I managed up until very, very recently. I've managed quite a significant buffer between my real name, my real identity, and my writing identity, which is obviously Harry Colfer. But that said, any story that I've used from my own experience and things that I've been to, I have to be very careful with respect to patient confidentiality. So generally, I have this nugget of an idea from something that I experienced. Invariably, I will change the gender involved. I'll change, obviously, the location. None of the names are the same. And then all of my fictional characters are thrown on top of that. So even if somebody was the other paramedic with me on that scene, they probably wouldn't recognize it. It's that dissociated from the reality.
So it's like a scenario. You just create a scenario and then you fictionalize.
And that's something. My writing's more. I mean, so many other paramedics or paramedic books and the like focus far more on the blood and gore and the sort of high intensity. Everyone's running around and stuff like that. That generally doesn't happen most of the time. We don't run. That's a one paramedic rule: is you never run. Because if you run into a scene, everyone else starts panicking. So you're going to walk in as the rock that's sort of like calm when everyone else is losing their shit. And I call it the swan philosophy, because you walk in and everything looks serene on top, but underneath your legs are going like this because your heart's going like this. But you've got to keep this demeanor in front of you to calm everything down. But yeah, I have to keep the reality of my jobs separate from what I write about, and it is definitely, there's a big difference. But what I try and do with that, with my stories, is they focus much more on the banter, how we as paramedics turn up and talk, and our talk in the cab. So it's as if you've got a fly on the wall of the cab that, and people get to see what it's like to be a paramedic. Unfortunately, you've obviously now got a lot of TV shows, the Ambulance Australia and the UK versions, which are the ones that first started off, and then there's US ones and all of those. And you can go and see what the ambulance services want you to view ambulance work as. If you see what I mean. The thing is that they're very sanitized. We watch them and just giggle because you just. The thing, for sake of argument, with Ambulance Australia, that was filmed, is it 2 seasons they've done in Brisbane? I don't know, at least one. I think they've done 2. They interviewed the paramedics. So you had to, if you wanted to be filmed, you had to apply. You then had to be interviewed. This is by the ambulance service. You had to be interviewed by the ambulance service. Make sure you were drinking from the Kool-Aid, and then they would allow you to be filmed. And so what that meant is that a lot of the scenes, they've been very sanitized. They were also had an ability to a veto to be able to say, no, you can't show that, or no, that has to be cut out, and the like. And so with my books, because they're fictional, I can say it how it is. Obviously you've got to, I understand it's a big organization, and they've got an ideal of what paramedics do and say, and they can't have the public realize that we actually make jokes about the patients, because that would just look really bad. And we make jokes about everything. It's constant.
That'd be like a coping mechanism, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is.
It
is, but you can't film it.
Because
you're just like these callous bastards. It's like, how can you be laughing about that? And sometimes I'll be telling a story, and I start laughing, and everyone in the room just is silent, staring at me. And then I realize, oh God, I'm not talking to paramedics. And it is very much a very, very dark sense of humor, and the logic behind it is that. If you can dissociate yourself from what you've just experienced and make fun of it, it separates your psyche from what just happened, and you can compartmentalize it and move it along. And that's very important for a paramedic, because basically we can go to some really confronting scenes and then dump the patient off, and immediately 30 minutes later you're out on another job, and your focus has to be on that other patient, not the one you've just dropped off the hospital that's got really mangled or whatever, or there's been some really sort of horrible scene, and you have to be able to remove your mind from that and move on. And the way we do it is just by belittling it and making fun of it, and thereby weakening its confrontation within your mind. Any job that you go to that's confronting, you will get flashbacks, you will get things you see, and they can be I think I said in my book somewhere that it's only I guess it's some form of post-traumatic stress, but I guess it's not really PTSD if it doesn't stress you. So if you allow it, if you can make a way that it doesn't stress you, then you can at least separate that off. And the best way that we do it is by talking about it and repeating the same stories over and over again about our jobs. We used to do that back at station, where we would talk through jobs. So, I've just been to this one, and obviously there'd be a lot of humor, involved as well. Now we're never at station because the workload is just ridiculous. And so we end up now at the write-up room at the hospitals. That's where we tend to stand around and chat then, or when on the ramp. But obviously you've got to be a bit careful, because if you're on the ramp, you can't have those sort of conversations in earshot of other patients. You have to be very careful. Also, we go to. I'm not laughing. That wasn't a laugh. We go to say a cardiac arrest, and the patient dies or stays dead, should we say? Because otherwise, and we go outside, and then we've got to have a debrief and sort of restock the vehicle and all that sort of stuff. And we end up making jokes and laughing. And we're outside, and we've got to, sort of like, I've got to be the one who's supposed to like watch and go, no, guys, we need to be on the other side of the ambulance, because they're going to hear us and it's not going to look good, But it is something that I've tried to encapsulate that in the books, but in a way that you understand why we do it. And not, there are some very confronting scenes in some of the books. The biggest one is, or one of the ones is the prologue of Dead Regular is quite confronting. There was a paramedic who came to me and it just went, "You've encapsulated all of my fears from my 30 odd years in working as a paramedic in one scene." And it was so confronting. I've had other paramedics that I gave the manuscript to, and they couldn't get past the prologue, and they just went, "No, I can't do this." So as long as you get through the prologue of Dead Regular, you'll get through the rest of the book.
That'll be the test. That'll be the test. So do you get many paramedics and medical people reading your books?
Yes. Yeah. That at the moment, that's probably where my biggest market is other paramedics, or other paramedics are buying the books to hand to relatives and friends, so they go, "This is what it's like."
It is.
This is, although it's encapsulated in a murder mystery for the first one, and a thriller in the second one, which is based up on Mornington Island, and another thriller with the high acuity with at the airport. The banter and the jobs that we go to was all. There was one in high acuity which one of the paramedics came over to me and said, "That scene, I was falling about laughing, but also grimacing at what was happening." And she said, "That was true, wasn't it?" And I went, "Yeah, it was." That was a real one. Yeah, we had not too much of a spoiler, because there's lots of scenes of paramedic stuff going on, but we got called to somebody who was basically septic, which means that they had very high temperature. They're quite sick, but they'd been left in a seat for 2 days. And we got called to them, and amazingly, there was a couple of PTS guys, patient transport service guys there, and they managed to get her out to the stretcher. And we're like, okay, and we stood her up, and cutting 2 days worth of diarrhea hit the deck, and as we stood her up, and it was the closest I've ever come to vomiting in 20 odd years of being a paramedic. And my poor crewmates had to just manhandle this woman onto the stretcher, and so that was a real scene that actually happened. And there's a few others, but as I say, I de-identify them, and sometimes the paramedics who are on scene may be able to recognize them, but most people won't. And it certainly avoids any sort of patient confidentiality issues. So
in your books, have you got like a main character that runs through all of them?
Yes.
Are they all set, so it's all connected?
Yes. So effectively, the story's all about a particular intensive care paramedic called Jonathan Byrne. And he's the main one in Dead Regular and all the way through. And then because the short stories were scenes, initially the first 6 were scenes deleted from Dead Regular, the way I've pitched them is that they're actually prequels. So the 32 short stories that I have written in that one all occur in the year prior to or coming up to the start of Dead Regular. So the 32 short stories are in that year, or that 6 months or so, all based in 2012. And then dead regular, follows on a year later is beneath contempt, and a year later is high acuity. And the reason, I started writing in 2012, so that sort of made it logical to base it then. But the reason is that, and it's something that I tell people who want to write emergency scenes, is you have to be aware of your time and location with respect to medical interventions. Things that we were doing in 2012 have changed to what we're doing now. Yeah. And that just happens in medicine. It's evidence-based medicine. We make changes to how we treat different conditions. And so at some point you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, yep, this is when it happens and this is how, and then I can work out what drugs were being used and, what interventions were available and that sort of thing. And so I set it at that time. And also it gave me a buffer with respect to criticism in the fact that, I could be saying, you're picturing, you're portraying things that are really wrong. And you go, well, yeah, but that was 10 years ago. It's all good now. It's all changed. Yeah. We're all it couldn't possibly be happening now.
Man, you've thought of everything, haven't you?
I try, but I probably haven't. A long time. It was only a couple of years ago where I actually put a face to Harry Colfer because I was required to supply a photograph to a competition I'd won. Oh, wow. And it was just like, oh crap. And now if you do a Google search for Harry Colfer, my bloody picture comes up. So that's sort of like blew the water out of me with respect to my anonymity. And and since then I've sort of become less worried about it. And hence why then we did, the podcast was another thing, because we obviously use video snippets and stuff where my face is on it. And I've just had an article written about me for Australasian Paramedic Association's magazine, Response magazine, and they've just done a 2-page spread with my photograph. So and then used my real name as well. So that's I think I've been outed. But hey ho, I think I've got like 1 year left of me, or this year left of me as a paramedic, and then I'm gonna quit and go off traveling. Get that bucket list ticked off.
You mean you can't be a paramedic while you're traveling the globe?
I could, but then I would. Yeah, I don't. I think I've after 20 years, I've sort of got a bit of burnout.
Yeah.
And I need to go and do something different. And so I might come back to it. I doubt it, but I might. I'm not going to burn too many bridges. Hopefully, we'll see.
The fact that you've got a medical background might make it easier for you to go on boats and stuff. Like you're like, no, if something goes wrong, he's here. Yeah,
I have had that, and then I've pointed out I've got no kit. So
as long as you've got a kit,
it's like I need the ambulance. I need all the shit in the ambulance to actually do something. It's just me standing there. Like I do remember I was on holiday in Portugal once, and this woman collapsed, and there's all these people around her, and my wife's like, go and help, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. And I've wandered over and I said, hello, what's the problem? And they start talking to me, and I'm just looking at them blankly because I can't speak Portuguese, and I'm like, yep, not a clue. And then I'm trying to ask, doing a bit of pidgin Portuguese of a few words that I knew, and eventually worked out she was suffering chest pain. And then I'm like, great, can't do anything for that either. And then the next thing, somebody turned up in a car. They bundled her in a car and drove off. And I'm like stood there like going, well, that was a lot of use. So yeah, there is limited things you can do without the kit to actually do interventions. And obviously I'll probably be one of the few boats when I have my own boat. I'll probably be one of the few boats that'll have a defibrillator on it. Yeah, because those have become much cheaper now. And so for a few $100, when you're talking anything on a boat costs a few $100 at least, starting point. And so having your own sort of defib on board a boat is probably quite a nice thing to have. But yes, I might have a reasonable first aid kit to be able to access. But unfortunately, all that stuff starts weighing. And so if you go walkabout, carrying all of that gear is just not on. I mean, when I turn up as a primary, turning up to say for a cardiac arrest, and we haven't got a the primary means I'm the first one there, and you've got no backup crew or they're off, and there's CPR in progress. I have to carry. This is when I was on the pod. I would be carrying a chest compression device which weighs about 17 kilos, oxygen kit, airway kit, response kit, and the defibrillator. So all up, it's probably closing in on 40 odd kilos at least walking into scene. And then you come to the first doorway and you can't get through. And you have to walk through sideways, get through the doors and then dump it all down and then actually start trying to work on the patient. So yes.
So
when you don't have that gear, you're a bit lost.
You're basically military without the gun,
No, we're not. I'll have to say we are definitely not military. There's a lot of ex-military and medics from the military who decide when they hit Civvy Street that they'll, well, I've been doing medicine. I've been a medic in the army. I'll go and become a paramedic. That's the obvious switch. And then they turn up to this organization, realize, and they think it's militaristic. It is definitely not. Yeah. If you tell an ambo to do something, it's the last thing you're gonna, because they will immediately go, why? Or they'll just wander off and do whatever So we are not. I mean, if you want the closest, probably militaristic one is the Far East, because they have to be. You say to them, there's a building. Everybody else sees a burning building, you run out of it, whereas they all run into it. Yeah. And so there's got to be somebody there says, you run in there, and they all do it, in a little unit. Whereas you tell that to ambos and we'll just we'll wait. we'll watch. And it's the same thing with anything that sounds dodgy. We'll often do a drive past to have a look. Because I'm a firm favorite of staying inside the metal box on wheels, drive past, check out that there's nothing too dodgy. If it looks dodgy, you keep driving, and then you wait for the cops to turn up because they've got lots of stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, I remember one job which I did do a short story on, and we turned up. We're driving to this job, lights and sirens, and it's like man has punched wall, man's hand is injured. And initially it was not normal. It wasn't lights and sirens. And then we were driving along. Then it's like there was some other things coming through. Patient is being violent towards the call taker. Lots of screaming on scene. Wait for police. And so we're like, okay. And then we're sitting there in the cab and we're making jokes. Bet it's an arterial bleed or something like that. And we're just sitting here. The guy's bleeding out. The next thing comes through. Seriously, not a joke. The thing is that caller is describing an arterial bleed. And you're like, oh, God. So then at that point, we then do the drive past. We drive up, and it's like, okay, scene looks dodgy, but okay. And this guy had punched a hole. Those windows that are fireproof windows with a wire inside them? Yeah. He'd managed to punch a full hole through that with his fist, right? But when he'd punched it through, he then ripped it back out and took a massive chunk out of his wrist.
Hey, it's the pullback thing. It's the pullback thing again.
That's what's going to do you.
Leave it in
there. And I open this door, and there's like a foyer bit with staircase going up, and there's 3 people lying there, one holding a towel around this guy's wrist, another one screaming, and I had nowhere to put my bags because there was so much blood. And that was just like a load and go. We just grab him, try and put a tourniquet on, throw him in the ambulance and drive really fast to sort this out. But you can end up sort of sitting there waiting for the cops. And then when you hear something, you go, let's just go and have a look, see if it's safe and check it out. So,
So what's next? Are you still writing? Have you got a long list of stories you're thinking about doing, or?
Very long list, because that's what and our other genre fiction podcast, that's one of the constant advice for writers is that write down your ideas, because you need to keep an eye, because you'll forget them, and then sometimes you go back. I go look at my ideas list and go, oh, that's actually quite good, I like that one. The problem I've got at the moment is I'm time poor. On a full-time rolling roster, it's difficult getting the time to write, but keeping the ideas going is something that's important. And I I've come to initially I was going to do this Jono series as to being 5 novels, but I've cut one down because it was going to be how ill prepared the ambulance service was for a pandemic. But I think politically I probably shouldn't write that one right at the moment. Maybe in a few years down the time,
5 to 10 years.
Yeah, 5 to 10 years, it might be something I could write. So I had to shorten it down to 4, and I'm writing the 4th one, which is called Show Cause, which has obvious implications from the title of what might be happening to poor old Jono. But after that, there are some ideas there's a character in the books called Frank Giallo, who's known as G, who's a detective. And I've got a few ideas for writing a spin-off with him as a Brisbane detective that I could move on to, and I've started working some ideas up for that. But my main thing is I will. So I'll keep certain things. If it's anything to do with paramedics, if it's anything that's a spin-off from the Harry Colfer books, I'll keep the Harry Colfer name and write it under that. But where I'd like to go and where my sort of preferences for writing is to go do science fiction, which is more like close fiction and things like that. There's one that I've actually started writing. I've got quite a way into it, but there's Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, which is a story. I think it was written in the 60s about firemen. It's a dystopian future where firemen actually burn books, and Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature that paper burns, and it's sort of it's this whole sort of like. The firemen always smell of kerosene because that's what they use to burn. And if you are found to have books in your house, then you either give them up or you'll be burnt with the books in the house. It's pretty, and there's a lot of things from it. That there's scenes where the people spend all of their time with their family on screens. They have these screens on the walls in their rooms, and they interact through the screens. And this is written in the 60s. It's literally the internet and reality TV, and you go through anyway. My idea is to have a book called Fahrenheit 1500 or 1600. 1600 Fahrenheit 1600, which is the temperature that bodies burn. And the paramedics are actually going out because of the population explosion and too many people. The paramedics are going out to euthanize people, and that's their role. And they actually use the bodies to fuel their ambulances. There's all this very twisted, very, very dark humor involved. But I'd like to get into science fiction, and then out of the short stories, I did get 2 wins from from the short stories for a competition, which is actually one of the Kennedy Awards, which is for journalism, and it's called the S.D. Harvey Short Crime Story Award. And I won 21, 22, and I got the. I sort of heard on the grapevine that Harry Colfer couldn't possibly award 3 years in a row the same author. So I then right, okay. So I submitted one under my own name, PG Davis, and submitted, which was a near science fiction one with a detective turning up, and there was an AI in the house, So I and then won that one, which is quite nice. So I have actually run 3 in a row, even if they're different author names.
you should have just pointed him to like Messi. He's won 8 Ballon d'Ors. And that actor Daniel Day-Lewis has won 4 Oscars. I mean, come on.
Yes. But when you get wind that they won't, you go, I'll change my name. What the hell? That's easy done.
That's like you put the beard on. Hello, it's not me.
I had to submit another photograph, so I had to sort of like do it with like dark lighting and sort of like put a hat on and glasses and make myself look a lot different from what from the photograph previously.
Talk to Jack Roney's photograph. He's awesome on his website.
Yeah, he keeps changing it, doesn't he?
It doesn't look like him, like totally. Like, you know what I mean?
It's sort of a bit like him, but yeah.
It looks like him in the shadows. Awesome. Well, before we let you go, tell tell us where we can, buy your books and follow
basically,
you and all that stuff.
they are available on Amazon and iBooks or whatever it's called now. However, anyone in Australia, please buy them from my website, which is www.harrycolfer.com. It's relatively easy to remember. It's just my name. Colfer is Colfer.
Yeah.
If you want to know where that came from, both my grandfathers were Harry and my grandmother's maiden name was Colfer. And when I typed that in, the domain name was available. So cool, I'll have that one. So and it's
awesome.
certainly better than Phil Davis, which is pretty boring to be quite honest as an author name. But yes, so please go to my website, order from there, and that's where And the other thing that I would always ask, if you like a certain author, if you read a book and really enjoy it, get onto Goodreads and just do a short one-sentence review, please. Because that's sort of what gets other people interested in the books.
100%.
Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to get you back on again, especially, about your Fahrenheit book. Because I think
I'd love to.
Ryan will join. We'll make sure Ryan joins us next time because that's right up his alley.
Yeah.
I can hear him now going, oh, no. And we'd be talking for another hour and a half, But
excellent.
Thank you for coming on, Harry. And
thank you. I look forward to the next one.
And hey guys, if you are an author and you want to come on, if you're a filmmaker, you want to come on, if you're just some random guy that has stories to tell, send us an email to thetrueandthefictional@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, stories_podcast. We're on Facebook as well. And thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.